I have here a new Scofield Reference Edition Bible. This is published by Oxford. This is an older edition. It's leather bound, little worn out on the bottom, but it's not too bad. The binding's tight. It was $4 at an MCC thrift store, and I just couldn't resist an interesting old leather bound Bible, so it came home with me. I've had it for a few months and been thinking about what I want to say about it. Now, if you are familiar with Scofield and the Bibles bearing his name, he was dispensationalist. He was promoting a certain theology that was very popular at one time and still has, I'm sure, many adherents. I don't hold to it, but we're not going to really talk about the notes. I don't find the notes that interesting unless you're really trying to understand that, and I personally would rather look at an original Scofield for that. What's interesting about the new Scofield is you'll see here it's Authorized King James Version with introductions, annotations, subject chain references, and such word changes in the text as will help the reader. So what that's telling us is this is a modified King James Version. It is the King James text, but in many places they have updated the language a little bit to make it easier to read. And we're going to look at examples of that throughout, as I thought it might be helpful to those who want to know what does it look like. So let's get started. The first couple examples I'll share come to us from the second chapter of Exodus. The first being in verse 2, we see, "And the woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw him that he was a beautiful child, she hid him 3 months." So what they do is when they change a word, they put these lines around it so that you see it was changed. And then there's a italic letter pointing to the note. It's center column references and notes. So it's note N. So the original was goodly. He was a goodly child. They changed it to beautiful. And a little bit later in the chapter, one of my favorite verses in the King James Version, when Gershom was born, she bore him a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, "I have been an alien in a foreign land." Now, if you know your KJV, you know that is stranger in a strange land. There's the originals up here, L and M. And I suppose this is maybe it's a more accurate translation. I'm not sure. It certainly is more representative of modern translations, but I love stranger in a strange land. That is a phrase that has come to me many times. I think especially when I first moved away from my hometown a few years ago and was feeling very out of place in my new city. I felt like a stranger in a strange land. Interestingly now, it looked like this was from 1967. If this was being done today, we don't tend to use alien. We would have probably foreigner in a foreign land. Alien today, primarily we're thinking extraterrestrials. Next example I want to look at comes to us from Ecclesiastes. This is in the first chapter, verses 15 and 16. So in verse 15 we read, "That which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is lacking cannot be numbered." Now that's wanting in the King James Version. "And then I spoke to mine own heart, saying, Lo, I am come to great estate, and have gotten more wisdom than all they that have been before me in Jerusalem. Yea, my heart had great experience of wisdom and knowledge." That I spoke to, we see that as note O, and that in the King James Version is communed with. I communed with mine own heart. So, there's another example. I'd say so far, looking at these, I don't think these are bad changes. I think they read well and they fit, but, I prefer the originals. This one is interesting. This is from Job chapter 18, verse 7. It reads, "The steps of his strength shall be shortened, and his own counsel shall cast him down." And shortened, we see the King James Version is straitened. I'm not sure if that is a different meaning of the word, or maybe a difference in how it's changed meaning over time or if it's a correction. But I noted that if we look at the Revised Standard Version, that same verse, it also has shortened. So it agrees, the change they made agrees with the RSV. Here is Psalm 18:7. This is actually what I was trying to find when I encountered Job 18:7, but it worked out. In Psalm 18:7, we see, because he was angry. In the King James Version, it's wroth, not angry, right there. Look at some New Testament examples now in the Gospel of Luke. First thing you might notice is now the notes and references are in the inside and outside margins instead of a center column. I don't know why the change in the same Bible, but that's interesting. Perhaps it tells us somewhere in an introduction I didn't read. First thing I'll look at is verse 9. Then began he to speak to the people this parable. A certain man planted a vineyard and leased it to tenants and went into a far country for a long time. So what it has there, it's leased it to tenants. Originally, that is, let it forth to husbandmen. The other verse in this chapter I want to look at is verse 24. They have show me a denarius. The King James Version has penny. And what we see is that some former owner of this Bible actually found denarius a little confusing or wasn't certain, and they actually wrote coin above it to help aid their understanding. Jumping ahead a little bit to chapter 22, still in Luke, verse 27, for which is greater, he that dineth or he that serveth? Is not he that dineth? But I am among you as he that serveth. And dineth is replacing the King James Version's sitteth at meat. For some changes, they don't add a marginal note if it's not changing the meaning a lot or something to that effect. We see an example of that in John chapter 1, verse 48. It says, Nathanael saith unto him, How knowest thou me? That is not the original King James Version language. In the King James Version, here's one here, we see Nathanael saith unto him, Whence knowest thou me? So that's an example of a small change that was made without really calling it out. And the last example we're going to look at is also going to come to us from John. And that is from chapter 14, verse 26. But the Comforter, who is the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name. So Spirit in the King James Version, that's ghost, which, of course, in modern translations, that's very typical that Spirit's used instead, as the word ghost kind of, I think, brings up other sorts of ideas and images for us in our current time. But yeah, I hope that helps you. I hope that gave you some sense of how the new Scofield Reference Edition reads and how it differs from a more sort of standardized King James Version. I personally would prefer to just read the KJV and just, if I run into words that I find difficult or struggle with, or something's not making sense, I compare it to another translation or check a dictionary. But I can see how it would be helpful. So I hope you found it helpful to see this. If you did, please give the video a like. And if you have anything you'd like to share, I invite you to do so in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching. God bless, and we'll see you for the next one.